And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Good afternoon. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist John Cowen with your Alaska Marine Forecast. Let's start off taking a look at sea ice across the North Slope. You can see our pack ice still in place here, not a whole lot moving either direction. Over the next few days, some slow melt happening from the shoreline as we would expect with the warmer temperatures across the inland areas, but otherwise really not a whole lot of movement here. Chukchi remains mostly free of ice. Taking a look at our surface chart for tonight, you can see we have a low pressure center here in the Gulf of Alaska, and that's bringing some stronger winds, generally from Kodiak Island across the eastern Aleutians, some stronger northwest winds there and some showers as well. That's going to be affecting the coastline for tonight into early Saturday, and then as the low drops south Saturday, we can see things starting to clear out along the immediate coast. Still some showers generally as we work our way inland, but otherwise not too eventful. The winds here now over the southeastern, or rather the eastern Aleutians and Kodiak Island starting to diminish Saturday, and especially as we get into Sunday, things really starting to wind down here. Our low begins to move even farther south into the Gulf of Alaska, so things are really starting to improve across the Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, and otherwise across the Bering. We have a ridge of high pressure here that really isn't going to go anywhere over the next few days, so expect some pleasant conditions across that area. So let's go ahead and take a look at our marine forecast for the Panhandle. We can see that Saturday, we're looking at winds around 20 to 25 knots, generally out of the south to southeast. Some stronger winds in the offshore areas near Yakutat, pushing wave heights up to about 7 to 9 feet in those areas. But otherwise, by Sunday, we expect those winds to really start coming down. Still easterly, around 15 to 20 knots, with sea states coming down to about 5 to 7 feet in the offshore areas. And then in the inshore areas, still looking at about 10 to 15 knots. And seas about 2 to 3 feet for most areas there. Moving on to the Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound areas, most of the farther inshore areas keeping some pretty light winds in the 10 to 15 knot range with seas about 2 to 3 feet. In the offshore areas for Saturday, we can expect generally east to northeasterly winds in the 20 to 30 knot range with seas up to 8 feet in those areas. And then a downward trend on Sunday as the low moves south. We'll see winds really start to decrease and generally become light and variable by about 10 to 15 knots, and sea states in that 2 to 3 foot range for most areas. Saturday, looking at eastern Aleutians and Kodiak Island, this is where we're going to have the stronger winds coming across the island. So looking at about 20 to 30 knots for most areas, seas about 4 to 6 feet for most areas. A little bit stronger here as we get southeast of Kodiak Island. And then by Sunday, again, starting to diminish at about 15 to 20 knots for most areas, seas coming down to about 2 to 4 feet for most areas. And then pretty easy forecast across the central and western Aleutians. You can see our dome of high pressure here really keeping things pretty calm and uneventful. So about 10 knots or less for most areas. Light and variable winds, seas about 2 to 3 feet for most areas. Very similar for Sunday, very little movement here of that high pressure system. So again, light and variable, minimal sea state. And then Saturday's forecast for the eastern Bering Sea, we can see that we have 10 to 15 knot winds, again with that high pressure dome really doing its thing and keeping winds fairly low across the area. Seas 2 to 3 feet. Again, very similar for Sunday. We have a little bit of eastern movement of that high pressure system that's just going to keep on bringing those winds down. So again, 2 to 3 foot seas and 10 to 15 knot winds. And then as we get up towards the northern half of the state, again, we can see we have our easterly flow, generally around 10 to 15 knots or so for most areas, a little bit stronger as we get offshore from Wainwright to Point Lay, but generally about 10 to 15 knots there, seas 2 to 4 feet, and then southerly winds coming up through the Bering Strait around 10 knots or so. Very little change for Sunday, maybe a little bit of an increase through the Bering Strait due to some pressure differential there, but otherwise southerly winds, seas 2 to 4 feet, in that area, and very little change across the North Slope. And that'll wrap up our marine forecast. I'm meteorologist John Cowen.